Welcome to The Topic on HCC TV. I'm Todd Duplantis. Thanks for being here today. If you're watching us on the cable channel, make sure you follow us in social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, most importantly, YouTube. We're listed under Houston Community College District. Follow us, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll get notifications when our shows are posted. You can also download audio podcasts at hccs.edu/podcast. We're talking about getting back to work today, or at least physically back in the office. HCC has just recently outlined plans for a safe and measured return to our campuses. Today, we're joined by Janet May, our Chief Human Resources Officer, Rodney Nathan, Interim Director of Talent Relations, and Bob McCracken, our Executive Director of Risk Management. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. I'll start with you, Bob. Maybe you could talk about the main driver that was the focus on getting people back onto campuses. I know Harris County had remained at the red level for quite some time over the last year. Did the change in that, the vaccinations, did all those play a role?
I think absolutely all of that played a role. So last fall, Fort Bend County moved from red to orange to yellow, then back to red. Harris County stayed in the red. And we had plans to open up much more than we did so in the spring, for spring semester. And mid-January, remember, we had that horrible peak in cases occurring locally. And so we pulled back from those plans. And really by the beginning of March, we saw that the number of cases and all of the metrics locally dramatically improved, and pretty steady improvement since then. And so we started planning for summer to increase the volume, and it set some targets for percentage of classes in person, and then kind of built around that, so that spring would, we would ramp up from spring to summer, and then again to fall. Hopefully the pandemic and metrics would continue to improve. And I have heard that there's an announcement from Harris County later today that hopefully will move us down to orange, because their metrics are looking very good.
Janet, I want to bring you in on this. Let's talk about how people will be returning, because not everybody will be returning at once. That is being very, it's scheduled and it's measured as to who's returning where and when.
It absolutely is, Todd. And again, thanks for having us on. Our decision, or the decision of who's coming back and what services are going to be provided, was mainly driven by our students and also our community. We wanted to make sure that we were providing those services to our students and our community. So with more of our classes coming back face-to-face, we wanted to make sure that we had the staff also available at our locations. So each of the supervisors and managers for those areas, they're making the decision on how often someone comes back, who's coming back, what their schedule is going to be. Will they be in a hybrid state or in a face-to-face state? And that's all being done based on the levels of services that we're providing. But we will be providing services during our normal hours as we go through, and our schedules are actually listed out on the web.
Rodney, I know I've reached out to you and Janet at times when I've had strange employee questions about COVID, because we get those during these times. It's a first for all of us. What are you hearing from the managers and maybe employees about the anticipation of getting back?
Great question, Todd, and thanks again for the opportunity to join you this afternoon. What we're hearing is managers are asking for guidance on how to best approach having folks come back. And employees are expressing what you might think: nervousness and apprehension. We've spent the last, 14 months being virtual and remote, and folks have gotten pretty used to that.
Yeah.
So now we're making a shift to come back into the office. And so we are working with managers, supervisors, to help give guidance on work schedules, how to bring folks in maybe on a staggered basis, and then for employees, working directly with them on how to handle any apprehension that they might have. For example, suggesting that folks who haven't been to a location just go through the exercise of driving up to the location. You don't have to go into the building, but there's some things we've gotten out of practice and habit of doing that we need to get back into to help ease that nervousness.
Bob, I know on the 24th of May, the campuses will be returning, but for a lot of the people who work at the district offices, 3100 Main, how is that looking right now? And from what I understand, that's a bit different as far as getting staff back into the building.
I think if we start with June 7th, June 7th is the start of summer session for students. And we know that 30% of the classes are scheduled to be on campus. And so we worked backwards from there and what does it take to support those students on the campuses. And that's really how the May 24th date came about, is that gives us essentially 2 weeks for staff to get into spaces, work out any kinks, get used to being there again, so that when students come back in larger numbers on June 7th, we're ready to support them. For the most part, 3100 is not directly servicing students. It's more indirect in supporting the staff. And all of those services have essentially been being done virtually for the last 14 months. And so, and then 31 has some particular challenges. We have a couple of tenants in the building. You have essentially the bank of elevators that has to hit all of the floors. And you have, particularly on the 11th and 12th floor, you have a large number of people and you have a lot of cubicles. So the social distancing is more of an issue. On campuses, we can really manage kind of social distancing largely by scheduling, right? By how many classes we schedule at a particular time. That's much harder to do in a building like 3100 for the most part, where everybody's coming and going at the same time. So exactly how we manage 3100 and getting people back into that space is still to be determined. I think we can look forward to that over the coming weeks and months as we kind of ramp back up.
Janet, I know throughout this pandemic, you've been hosting coffee breaks weekly with our staff, where they could join you and a guest to talk about operations at HCC. What have you learned from the faculty and staff working remotely? And I know you've also surveyed them as well. Maybe you can tell us some of the things you've been able to glean from that.
Yeah, so one of the things we really gleaned, in the beginning was kind of this apprehension of getting used to working remotely. What we really learned was that our managers and supervisors were very supportive. So that was one of the questions we asked. Touch point is, is your manager or supervisor being supportive of you in this new remote environment that we were in? As we continue to go along, everybody kind of gets into that routine of being in this virtual work world and this remote environment. We all now have figured out, Teams, Zoom, WebEx, every other thing as we go through. And so everybody got very comfortable. So as we're starting to come back, we're starting to see some of the same things again. What's going to happen? Do I have to wear a mask? Yes, HCC has the regulation for wearing a mask. Will there be social distancing? So what we've done through the virtual coffee breaks, especially over the last month, is we've had guests on. In fact, Bob's been my guest twice, just to talk about the sense of what does it mean coming back? What are those questions? And we've had really great conversations. We've also done our lunch and learn sessions. Those have been things over the last year. Actually, talent engagement from March of last year until the end of April this year have conducted over 300 virtual events for our faculty, staff, and students. And a lot of those were in support of simple things of, how do I get used to this? How do I deal with anxiety? As we go through, we've had different mental health providers come on from our employee assistance program and also from the Employees Retirement System of Texas, who provides our benefits. So we've had a lot of that. We've had panel discussions in the last month with people who had been on our sites since October or never left, to be quite frank, because we did have people that were at our different locations and talked about how they experienced and what their experiences were. And they took questions, and I think it's really helped as we're starting to come back. So I think the biggest thing we've learned is really listening to everyone, and they know that we're experiencing the same things. We've had during our sessions, we've had our work buddies that have 4 legs and fur. They start barking. I had one use a squeaky toy in the middle of a meeting, things of that nature. We've had kids make cameos. So it's all about that, kind of understanding that we're all human as we're going through this, and we're all going through it together. I think that's been the biggest thing. So those are a lot of the things we're hearing. We're continuing the coffee breaks and the lunch and learns, even though we're starting to come back more on site. We think those are really important. I actually enjoy them. I think I found a second career as we go through on that end, and working with everybody as we go through. So we're going to continue to do those.
We're going to go ahead and take a short break. When we come back, we're going to bring all of our three guests once again. What's it going to look like when we return to campuses? Obviously, there's been a lot of changes if you haven't been back to the campuses in 13 months or so. So what's it going to look like there? And are we ever going to have in-person meetings again, or are we going to be doing our meetings virtually? We'll talk that and more when we return on The Topic.
If you love them enough to relearn math so you can teach them math, then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
When I first saw a turtle, my heart was full. Now anything but lonely.
We had this deep connection, this heart connection.
He just wants to be close to you and part of your life.
Every day with Turtle is a perfect day.
When I'm holding her, it makes me feel calmer.
I think everything he does shows how much he loves us.
When we adopt a shelter pet, we discover they're a little bit of a lot of things.
But they're all pure love.
The faculty at HCC represents the best of the city. They're committed to getting our students to their goals.
A 4-year degree.
Workforce training. A better life.
HCC, for everyone, anytime, anyway.
Welcome back to The Topic on HCC TV. I'm Todd Duplantis. If you're watching us on HCC TV, look for us in social media and YouTube under Houston Community College District. And if you're into podcasting, well, we've got all of the audio versions of our shows available to download and listen at your convenience. Go to download them at hccs.edu/podcast. We're talking about returning back to campuses today here at Houston Community College. A lot of us have been away for quite some time. We're looking at going back to serve our students and try to get back to some normalcy in life. We're joined by Janet May, Chief Human Resources Officer, Rodney Nathan, Interim Director for Talent Relations, and Bob McCracken, our Executive Director for Risk Management. Bob, I want to ask you, when students, faculty, staff, and visitors do return to campuses, are they still going to be required to wear masks? Are entrances going to be limited? And will you be checking people in, making them use the app? What's it going to look like?
We have made some changes for summer. So, if you're not aware, since last October, we've checked over 300,000 people into our buildings, right? So we have had a lot of people into our buildings, but not every building has been open. Everybody was funneled through kind of a single entrance. As you know, you had the pre-screening that you did on your phone before you came to campus. You showed your green screen with your QR code. We scanned it. You got your wristband and you went in. So for summer, we're eliminating some of those bottlenecks. We're still asking you to do the pre-screening on your phone. You're still going to get a green screen, but when you arrive at campus, we're not going to check your green screen every day. We're not going to issue a wristband. We're going to have some greeters there who are welcoming you, making sure that you're wearing a mask. You have to follow the 3 W's, right? Wear your mask, watch your distance, wash your hands. And so those things are what we're really emphasizing. And if you don't have a mask and you show up, we're going to hand you a mask. If you need some hand sanitizer or some sanitizing wipes, the greeters are going to have those to hand to you. And so there's going to be more entrances open than there were during the spring, but it's not going to be wide open where every single entrance is going to be open. So that's going to vary by campus. And so if you get to a door and it's not open from the outside, it's open from the inside as an emergency exit, but you may need to go to a different door than you normally went to.
Bob, one of the things a lot of folks are already asking, because we've certainly gotten the questions in social media, is food service is very important on campuses. Will there be food service for the campuses that had them before?
Yes and no. So some of the feedback we got during the spring was that things were a little barren, right? So break rooms were closed, refrigerators weren't available, water fountains were closed, the study areas were closed, computer labs were closed, the atria were closed. All of those kind of common spaces were closed. Vending machines were largely empty. And people said, that just doesn't work. We need to get those things opened back up. And so you're going to see those spaces opened up, right? So tutoring centers and libraries and those spaces for students and staff to kind of go and relax a little bit in between classes or whatever the case may be. Break rooms will be open. They're stocking up the vending machines. They're loading those up this week and next so that there'll be food in those. The hot foods, from French Corner and whatnot, I do not believe are opening over the summer. That's targeted for fall. We are looking at some options of getting some sandwiches and those types of things into the vending machines. We're still encouraging people to bring their own food because it will be a little bit limited, but there'll be some spaces to eat, right? So hopefully that's better than what we've had. I will say water fountains and ice machines are still going to be closed off though, because those are kind of high risk items. And so those two items in particular will be closed, but other spaces will largely be open.
Rodney, I know in the past when when an employee is tested positive for COVID, they need to report it, or if they've come in contact with someone who had COVID. Now that people are getting vaccinated, how is that going to work? Are you requiring employees who may have tested for COVID to report that to you?
We are, Todd. So employees will still be asked to report if they test positive. We still have our self-reporting form. We'll still have the resource line for folks to call into so that then we can give them the appropriate guidance on the actions that they might need to take. But we still are going to be asking folks to report that. Yes.
Once again, because people may be wondering about the social distancing, you guys are going to be managing with the managers and supervisors who's returning so that everybody's not there at the same time so that people can practice social distancing. Absolutely.
So I can give you one example. We've got a group that we're working with who is only planning to have 20% of their staff, so roughly 5 or 6 people, there one day every other week, right?
Okay.
And so then they'll let other staff members come on another day every other week. So it will definitely not be 100% all back at one time. It will definitely be staggered out.
Janet, here's a question for you, because we're all functioning virtually now, and it seems to be working for a lot of people. Do you see a time in the next year or so where we're going to get back into meetings, into boardrooms, and larger offices, or is this virtual meetings going to keep happening?
Well, Todd, I think it's going to be a combination. To start off with, we're actually getting ready to send out a memo to all supervisors and managers tomorrow on Wednesday, and basically just some reminders as we're coming back because people have been gone for a while. And one of those recommendations is to ensure that we continue to do meetings virtually. So even if you have people in the office, still do your meetings via Microsoft Teams or WebEx. We're not good right now of having one group here and then also meeting online as we go through. So really start off with that. And that's also some more familiarity as we're going through. So it keeps things a little bit more in tune to what we're used to. As we continue to go through this process, and as we have more individuals coming back, or as the CDC guidelines change, or the guidelines for Harris County, and we see a change with the virus, then we can expect that probably will start, not now, down the road as we continue to monitor everything, maybe start mastering those things of having virtual meetings along with having some people in a location having a meeting because they're there. But there's a lot of things we're working through. So for right now, we're really encouraging to continue to do the meetings through your WebEx, your Teams, things of that nature. I do want to say it's going to be really hard that first time you're in there. People are going to be apprehensive, but they haven't seen people for like 14 months. So what's your first inclination when you haven't seen your coworker for a really long time?
You want to hug them.
Exactly. You want to go run and hug them. So we got to remind everybody, no running, hugging, as we go through. But, I think a lot of people are looking forward. As Rodney mentioned, we have people that are coming in and out. We've got some services such as our library services who said they're going to be back 100%. So they're actually going to be providing 100% of their services, but they're able to do that through social distancing as we go through. So it's really been, I have to give hats off to all of our managers, our supervisor, our college operations crews, Bob McCracken's team as we're going through, and also our facilities crews for really working together to make sure we have a very safe environment to come back to.
Janet May, Rodney Nathan, Bob McCracken, all with Houston Community College. Thanks for being here and giving us a glimpse of what we can expect as we move back onto the campuses. Stick around on the topic. We're going to be talking about, hey, are you feeling a little anxiety with going back? We'll talk about how to deal with that. Stick around. More to come after this.
When I was your age, I was just like you, fascinated by stars. But now I get to search for life in the universe. And who knows, maybe life is looking for us too.
So we're like aliens to them?
Yeah. Does anyone want to be a scientist now?
I do.
Awesome. We need more girls in STEM.
Maybe we can find aliens.
Nobody likes an awkward silence. You can actually use it for something good.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
I love teaching at HCC. I love helping students.
With college credits.
With scholarships and financial aid.
Training them for life-changing careers.
Come learn with us. HCC, for everyone, anytime, anyway.
Welcome back to the topic. I'm Todd Duplantis. HCC returning to campuses May the 24th, getting ready for our summer semester with our students and back in-person classes continuing on through the fall. A lot of folks feeling anxiety about getting back into the world, but that's okay. Anxiety is to be expected. We've got Dr. Sean Fitzpatrick, Executive Director of the Jung Center here in Houston. Sean, it's great to have you. Thanks for being here.
Hey, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Anxiety to get back into an office setting. A lot of people are fearing this, but that is okay to fear it, correct?
You know, absolutely. I think that this experience over the last 14, 15 months now is really unprecedented in human history and from a mental health standpoint, right? So what we've been told consistently and for good reason is that we need to be very concerned about who we're in contact with, the spaces that we enter, right? And what we don't know about the people we encounter and the places we go can be deadly, not just for us, but for our family members, that we can pass it without knowing it. We could pass the disease around. So it makes perfect sense that that when we are now starting to share spaces again, that our first response would be fear. And anxiety is a fear that we have of a future that we are imagining, right? And we've been expecting to imagine threats everywhere in our environment for the last 15 months, right? Anxiety is normal. It's actually been encouraged for very good reason.
When you do head back into the office, should you expect, if you are anxious about things, feeling some anxiety, should you expect a range of emotions? Are there some key indicators that you should be looking for before you holler at someone, inadvertently because you're nervous?
Right. So for that would be ideal. Okay. So it would be ideal if you were able to notice what you're feeling, expect that you're going to feel things that you can't predict, and allow yourself just enough space to process it before you act. That's ideal. I think what's real is that you may well have moments where you're not able to control that, right? You may well have moments where you snap at colleagues or you feel scared for no reason, or confusion. Like, I think confusion will probably be a good part of our reality for some time to come. And honestly, things like just awkwardness, there's going to be social awkwardness. You were talking in the last segment about that desire to run up and hug people, and there's going to be awkwardness as we feel those experiences, and then have to navigate. Well, wait a minute, the way I think about the risk here may be different than the way that others think about the risk here. So we're going to need to become more patient with our own emotional experience, more attentive to it, and also more patient with others' emotional experiences and attentive to it as well, because people will act in ways very different from the ways that we do. I think we need to begin to just assume that's the case, that's the starting point.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. I mean, here's an example. At HCC, they're asking you to wear a mask at all times, unless you're in your office by yourself. Now, if a coworker comes in you don't have your mask on, you feel like, well, I'm fully vaccinated, but you need to take them in consideration for this. How do you get through all that? I mean, you don't want to offend somebody or upset them because you decided, I feel fine not wearing a mask.
It's a really good question. My first thought about it is to err on the side of just checking in.
Yeah.
You know, what we're doing. And this is something that I've been doing as I've started to see clients in person. So I'm a psychotherapist, and during the pandemic, most of my client contact was on Zoom. It was not on Zoom, but on a teletherapy platform. And once we started to see clients again in person, we'll always start wearing masks. And then I would check in with them and say, hey, you know, I'm fully vaccinated. And I'm okay with taking off my mask, but I want to check in with you because it's perfectly okay for us to keep our masks on. So I think if we just get used to that, acknowledge that it's awkward, and start with it, lead with it. Like, this is where I'm at. I want to respect where you're at. Where are you at?
Let's think about this too. We're returning to work. We may have had kids at home for most of the last 14 months. The kids are going to be changing. I'm changing my environment. My pets are going to go through some anxiety because I've been here with them for the last year or so. You know, there's all these outside factors outside of yourself that you feel like you're worried for and you're responsible for.
It's interesting because I have a child who is back in school, and we went through the first part of the pandemic. He went back to school in October. And we've been navigating that. It's the dog actually that gets me, as you mentioned that, because my dog has had the best year of her life. Yeah. Right? And I do feel sadness about, not just sadness, but concern, because what I had assumed before the pandemic, which is that, you know, my wife and I were largely out working and my son was at school. And so she was alone most of that time. And now she's gotten very accustomed to her people being around. And so it's normal to be concerned about that. And I think, you know, depending on the spaces that we're coming back to, whether it's a workplace or school, I mean, I think it's probably obvious that you're not going to be able to bring your pets with you to HCC when you come back on campus.
That's frowned upon nowadays.
Yeah. But I do believe that it's normal, one, to notice the difference, and honestly to grieve the loss of the connection, right? To grieve the loss of that time with the animals, and thirdly, to be asking yourself different questions than you did before about what it's like for animals right now, and whether we want to make different choices about how we spend our time. And some of us might have the privilege to be able to telecommute part of our hours, and it might be a consideration, right? Because we want to spend more time with those creatures that we've gotten close to over the pandemic. Yeah.
What about working in, you know, an office environment again? A lot of people have gotten used to working at home. Now things are changing dramatically. I mean, is that selfish to feel anxiety over that alone?
No. And again, I would say patience with yourself and with your colleagues. I would expect, and also I would normalize having conversations about it, right? It's okay to talk about it. Yeah. It's okay to talk about it being awkward, about us being confused and not sure what's quote unquote right, because what's right is very different for each individual. And if we can, in our teams and our groups, just get used to talking about it. And I do think it comes back around to empathy and respect. You know, try to imagine what the other person is thinking and feeling when we're startled, maybe by them having a different attitude about it than we do, and having respect for whatever that position is. It may be that there are practical matters that have to be addressed in terms of, well, you know, there's some employees, for instance, here at the Jung Center, we were talking about this just a little bit ago. There are some employees here who are mandatory on-premise customer service, you know, or mandatory on-premise for other reasons. And so we talk with them and engage with them about what that feels like for them and what might allow them to feel safe if they're struggling with feeling safe in this environment. And it's going to be an ongoing process. I think it's an iterative, ongoing conversation.
Dr. Sean Fitzpatrick from the Jung Center here in Houston. Thanks for joining us this afternoon and giving us some great tips. You can catch Sean live on our morning show, Up to the Minute, once a month. Sean, we'll see you again sometime.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks. Everybody take care.
And thank you for joining us today on the topic. Of course, make sure you join our podcast network at hccs.edu/podcast. I'm Todd Duplantis. I'll see you next time on the topic.